Jack Miller?
I'm looking back there for Jack Miller. He's not there.
Where's the clicker?
Oh, he gave me this for you.
Thanks. All right. Hi, how are you doing? I'm going to tell you a story tonight, and I have a photo accompaniment, which will be coming up presently, I'm sure. That wasn't it. Okay. My father was a complicated man, a Renaissance man. He pretty much had it all going on. He was funny, creative, musical. He created original paintings, he did wood carvings, and he had bands on and off for 50 years. This was his band, Banjo-Rama. He told a new joke every day. And this was pre-internet. I don't even know how that's possible. He graduated from Boston College in 1953, where he met my mother, and they married in 1955. 12 years later, my mom and dad had me, the youngest of 5 children. Let me repeat that. 5 children. The idea of 5 children kind of blows my mind. My dad worked in law enforcement, and he attempted to clothe, feed, and house 5 children. Oh, not that one. Okay, how do you go back? There we go. A wife and himself. Doing this was extremely stressful, and money was tight. He worried about paying the bills. He worried about keeping his family safe. He had 2 boys, and if anyone's a parent of a boy, they know that keeping boys alive is difficult. They're constantly doing crazy things, shouting, "Watch this!" At any given moment in my childhood, I wasn't sure who I was dealing with. The fun dad? Or the stressed out dad? Our home was concrete block construction, as was common in Miami, because concrete doesn't fly away in a hurricane. My dad had a good sense of design, so we didn't have a boring box of a house like everyone else in the neighborhood. Instead, we had a Spanish-inspired, mustard-colored house with a red tile roof. To make it even more interesting, my dad took the extra concrete blocks and red tiles and built a 14-foot freestanding wall containing 3 arches that was at the head of the driveway, a few feet away from the house. My dad also knew the value of shade, and he planted a veritable forest in the yard. One day, in my haste to get outside, I slammed the back door. This infuriated my stressed-out father. He made me open and close the door 100 times, softly. When my dad's office moved, they needed some lobby art, and my dad volunteered to create some. I only remember 2 of the pieces. One was a decent copy of Picasso's Don Quixote. My father art directed the other piece, and all 5 kids had fun putting primary color paint on canvas. He asked each of us to do a different thing. What I remember is there was a set of handprints, a set of footprints, some paint splatters. The end result was a sparse, modernistic piece that was quite good, and one we all participated in making. He signed it Pouton, because in his mind it was a put-on, it was a joke. My dad got home from work every day at 5. One afternoon, it was about 4:55, when I remembered my dad asked me to pick up tomatoes from my neighbor's garden. They lived at the end of our block, and since I knew he would be coming home soon, I decided to save time by riding my bike. I stood on my pedals, cranking as hard as I could to get back before my dad when my foot slipped off the pedal. I went over on my right side, and I slid. My hip and my shirt were shredded. But knowing my dad, I got back up on my bike, bleeding, and I pedaled to the neighbors, I got the tomatoes, and I raced home. And only then did I address a 3-inch by 2-inch bleeding road rash. When guests came for dinner, I was trotted out as entertainment ever since I was little. My dad played the piano and I sang. I had a small repertoire of songs. My dad started playing weekends at the Ground Round with his band, Banjo-Rama. You might remember that photo. Well, I know he did this to make money. He got a lot of enjoyment from making music. Occasionally my mother and I would go and I would sing with the band. brothers, one of which is in the audience, who helped my dad with projects. When they left home, I became the boy. I held pieces of wood as he sawed them. I held flashlights on car engines. One day, my dad needed to bleed the brakes of our 1971 electric blue Cadillac DeVille hardtop. My dad made adjustments and then shouted, "Pump!" I would pump the brakes to get the air out of line. On this particular day, my dad asked me to move the car up a foot. Being 10, I said no. "Don't worry, it'll be fine," he said. "No, Dad, I don't know how to drive. Just turn the car on, put it in gear, and move it up a little." I did not want to do this, but there was no arguing with my dad. I took a deep breath, turned the car on, put it in gear. The truth is, I never even touched the gas. The car simply rolled all 2 tons right into the arched wall. The impact was so great, it knocked the wall right over like a domino onto our house. The noise was deafening. I was terrified. I thought my father would murder me right then and there, and I immediately burst into tears. My mother came rushing out of the house. Bob, are you okay?" My father replied calmly, "I'm fine, but you might want to ask Erin how she is." My dad didn't kill me that day. In fact, he was very kind. "It's okay," he said as I sobbed. "I told you to do it. It was my own fault." He took ownership for what was really a stupid idea. But now we had a 14-foot concrete wall leaning against our house. It was the middle of summer in Miami, which meant it was hot. My dad was reluctant to do the manual labor required to get rid of it. In a way, our ackee tree solved the problem. We had a giant tree in the front yard, which bore an almost plastic-looking pink fruit called ackee. If you happened to have your face next to one of the fruits as it opened and you breathed in, you could die. If you ate either the black nut or the yellow fleshy part when they were raw, you could die. You could eat the yellow part only if you cooked it in some particular way that I never really understood. Growing up, people knocked on our door to ask to gather the ackee fruits. Our family didn't eat them, so my dad always said yes. Shortly after I knocked the wall onto our house, 2 men came by in an old Ford van and asked if they could gather some ackee. My dad agreed and talked with them as they gathered the fruit. They asked about the wall, and my dad said we needed to get rid of it. They were willing to do the job cheap. Even though crashing the car into our house, into the wall, was extremely traumatic, I'll never forget smiling as the van drove away with its tires almost flat from the weight of an arched concrete wall. My dad passed away in 2001. He gave me away at my wedding, but he didn't live long enough to meet my children. I think they would have loved him. Music came back to me in my adult life, and I can't help thinking what a kick he would get from my musical exploits. My father was a complicated man. I miss him, and I dedicate this song to him. Here somewhere. He told me to move it. I said, "Dad, I'm only 10. I can't drive that big old Cadillac." He said, "Go for it," and then
fled along